what ifs.
Yeah, I mean, just like what if Sheldon Rankins hadn't broken his leg at the beginning of preseason and he plays all year long. I mean, if we base off the 5 games that he's had, this defensive line's been great all year long. But the truth of the matter is he's only been here 5 games, and we've had 13 sacks in that 5-game span and only 11 sacks before, but we can't play the what-if game. We have to go off what the team shows us. And one of my favorite quotes will probably be this way for forevermore is, the team is who we thought they were. They're simply not that good of a team right now, but they have the potential to be a great team within 1 year.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the totality of the season, the highs and the lows, you have they've actually done a phenomenal job of an on-the-spot rebuild. If you look at where they were, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and where they are now, just from a roster depth, from a talent standpoint, from a youth standpoint, they've actually done a really good job of helping to rebuild this team towards the future, but it is the future. You need an edge rusher. You need at least one more linebacker. You might need another running back, because Marcus always gets dinged up. And some of that's the nature of the position, but, he got hurt last game, and he was hurt, coming into the game. I in no way believe if Mark Ingram is healthy that the Saints have as much of an issue running the ball and overpassing the way they did against Detroit, but they clearly just didn't have faith in the offensive line and didn't have faith in Hightower, and so they had to go, heavy pass, which, we saw how that worked out.
Yeah. And I also want to say this credit, because Brian brought this up earlier dealing with Robertson, but I think at this point, in the season, everybody on the field is banged up. So I think kudos to Ingram. I watched him limp off the field and then come back 2 drives later, and it's sad to me. It's going to be funny because you would have loved to hear it earlier. I was a Hightower apologist tonight. To me, it's ridiculous that Ingram goes out, Hightower gets 2 touches the rest of the game. And I understand what we're talking about, the offensive line not performing to the level that we want, but you also got to play it smart too. You can't abandon what has been a strength for you all year long either. And specifically with us going against, the Buccaneers this week in Tampa, if we do want to have a legitimate, glimmer of hope at playoffs, we got to win that game and every game following. But that offense, in terms of defense, where we are today, we don't match up very well because we don't have a corner who is either 1A, healthy enough, or 2, good enough to cover Mike Evans and stop him for the monster season he's having. Jacquizz Rodgers has shown that he can be a pretty serviceable running back while they've had injuries at that position, and their offensive line's not doing terrible either. So it has to be a game where we control the ground game from the offensive standpoint and control time of possession. So no matter who's injured, if Mark Ingram's only able to do 5 carries that game, then give the ball to Hightower. You got to do something.
Yeah, and it's obviously my personal opinion, and I don't have in the building sources, and I frankly haven't asked around about it, because I'm pretty sure Daniel Lasco is getting the red shirt year that Sean's kind of become known for with certain types of players. I don't think he's been out this far with a hamstring. I think they've been avoiding putting him on IR just so they can get him some practice reps, have him in the weight room, have him in the film room, some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But to me, if that's the case, this is the point in the season where I roll the dice. I play the young kids. We've already seen him in pass protection earlier in the year. It was a strength of his coming out of school, and it seems to be one that translated, so you don't worry about him getting Drew killed. He has that game breaker element to his game. I'm on the bus for, at this point, play all your cards. Play all the young kids. Give them a chance and let them show you who they are, because either they flash and they show you who they can be, and it gives you a chance to win these last 4 games and maybe have a shot at the playoffs, or they don't, but they get valuable game reps, they get some experience, and you have a better idea of what you have going into next year. So for me, that's a win-win. If we had won this game, it's a different conversation, but we didn't.
I certainly see that point of view, but the type of people that Drew Brees and Sean Payton are, they're going to be eliminated from playoff contention and still be playing everybody that's a starter for whatever their logic is. So, I mean, I like Lasco. I think that because one of our callers earlier brought up a Green Bay fan suggesting that the Packers trade for Ingram, which with the troubles they've had, not just for the troubles, I think it'd be a good idea for Green Bay simply because they run a zone blocking scheme. It would take some pressure off Aaron Rodgers, and he'd probably get used a little bit more under that scheme than he is here in New Orleans. So should that happen, the door will certainly be open to somebody like Lasco. But I don't know, the Saints seem to find running backs here and there, so Lasco might not even be with the team in 2 years just by how trends seem to be. So maybe that's why they just don't give them the play time that they probably deserve towards the end of a losing year.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those catch-22 situations, what we were talking about earlier, all the what ifs. It's the sad reality of a losing team. Now, there's that old cliche, you are what your record says you are.
Yeah.
And it's on one level I agree with it, but you are more than what just your record says you are. Like, you can be 4 or 5 win team, which is right now honestly what the Saints are and could be what they end up as. But that doesn't mean that you have the hallmarks of a 4 or 5 win team. Meaning like you don't have pieces. A critical weakness can cause you to lose games, but simply making that weakness add up to the level of average in a year, and all of a sudden the other team is really, really good. I think a great example of that is the Carolina Panthers. If you look at the way they are this year, last year they had an average secondary. They had Norman, who's a good to sometimes very good football player, and a dumpster fire in their secondary. But him being good enough allowed them to scheme offenses out of games because you couldn't attack them deep enough before their front seven could get to you, and that front seven is incredible.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, that secondary is not even average. They're bad. Now that defense can't be incredible. They can't give Cam Newton, more drives starting past the 50 than any other team in the league, which is what they had last year. He is the best red zone quarterback in the league just because of his running ability, some of the things he can do. You take those away, now Cam has to be an efficient quarterback. Work the length of the field, work through progressions, execute a full offense, which he's never shown he can do. Hasn't shown he can do this year. He's got Kelvin Benjamin back. The excuses are gone. And some of that's, an indictment on Cam, but it's more of just showing, football is such a team game where one unit, one area, dropping below par can have such a huge impact on the team. And the reverse is also true, where you have another unit that becomes extraordinary and it raises everything else up. I'm certainly not down in the dumps about the Saints, but it's disappointing to see them lose so many of these close games or games where you look at it, that play doesn't happen, and they're easily in this game. But those plays happened.
Well, I know I'll get Brian to chime in just a second. Me and Brian and Nader were talking a little earlier, just kind of based on when you were, and I said, for me, coming into this 2017 offseason, my biggest need is edge rusher. Now, it's been edge rusher since Gillette had his whole ordeal and he got handed his papers. But the reason I say that is the most important is because linebackers, as you said, to me, that's a minimum of 2 starters because I'm not going to call Ellerbe a starter because he can't play 16 games. He's got the talent to be a very good linebacker. The guy hasn't played a full season, I think, ever in his career. If he did, it was 6 years ago with Baltimore. So I can't throw him up there as a starter. So Craig Robertson's the only guy I got. So you're talking about needing at least 2 starters and probably 1 more depth. Corner, we need more at corner. Nader doesn't like Bro. I like Bro. Regardless, you can't have just one. P.J. Williams is a toss-up. He's an unknown. But from the defensive line aspect, they're only 1 player short of being a great defensive line. That's it. And that's hopefully that we can keep Nick Fairley coming in 2017. So if we could do that, then we could start to do, as you were saying, like Carolina did, mask a lot of the deficiencies we have elsewhere because we're able to get to the quarterback rather quickly, and we have players on that defensive line who also play the run well. For example, Cameron Jordan, who's one of the best run-stopping defensive ends in the NFL, as well as a good pass rusher. And then you got Tyler Davison, a solid one tech, etc. So that's why I think we should really focus on that. Brian mentioned a couple names. We're pretty sure, because we know the Saints, they're going to make it to 7-9 and lose that top 10, top 5 draft pick. But there's some other guys, Auburn's got a good defensive end. If he falls, Alabama's got, a couple of guys. So there's some potential that we fill in that spot there and can make one position grouping great that will give us enough of what we need to put us over the edge, kind of like what you were saying with Carolina.
Yeah, definitely. And beyond the draft, I have a feeling I think the Saints are going to go – I don't think they might go pass rusher in the draft, but I think that's going to be their number one priority in free agency. There's a few guys, not necessarily elite players, but very good to very good, which is enough to
Yep.
significantly improve that unit. I would keep my eyes on a guy like Melvin Ingram. San Diego does not have a lot of money. They don't have an ability to make a lot of money free. And for once, the Saints are going to have money available. And he's also actually a very good scheme fit for what Dennis Allen wants to do. I would look at a player like that, a guy who's already proven he can get to the quarterback at the NFL level. And then that leaves them open in the draft to go after other positions that are, you're able to have a little bit more variance on.
I'm going to give you a name I'm going to throw out because I haven't heard him mentioned a lot for the Saints. I think the Saints have a chance to target him because Carolina has got so many free agents coming up. They've got 18, I believe, but they have 2 specifically at one position. They've got Charles Johnson, who is, the big name guy. And then they've got this guy named Mario Addison, who's a very solid defensive end. He's looking at 6.5 sacks so far throughout this season, and he could be a not cheap, but a lower budget signing that could come in and do kind of like Nick Fairley is doing and surprise some people. Now, I don't think he's going to be cheap. I think he's probably going to get anywhere between the $2 and $4 million a year range, but that's something that we can afford now. And he's done this consistently, so it's not like he's just having one good season. He's had at least 6 sacks all of the past 3 years for Carolina. I know that's with a great front seven and a decent secondary at times, but he's 29, and he's a good fill-in person if we decide to not try to go after a pass rusher in the first round.
That would be a very interesting addition, and it'd be a similar situation as far as the defensive front. The Saints and Carolina aren't built the same way, but they really have 3 out of 4 guys that, especially on pass rushing downs where you go, that guy's a problem, that guy's a problem, that guy's a problem. And there was 5, 6, 7 plays last week where Stafford leaked out, and every one of them was on Kruger's side. Cam Jordan's chasing him away, Rankins is pushing him back, but there's always that gap for him to escape by. And that's not completely, bashing Kruger, but the reality is a better player there, those lanes aren't available.
Well, let me, Brian, throw out a couple of names that you had earlier just so I can get some more opinions here. It's right at 9 o'clock, so we're going to push it just a few more minutes, get some predictions for Tampa, and then we'll have to wrap it up. But I definitely want to hit on this position because the Saints have needed to hit it for a while, and it's about time we do. So we need to throw some names out there so people can be watching.
Yeah, I really would put Melvin Ingram's at the top of my list, just from a physical standpoint, from a scheme standpoint, from a production standpoint. I think he's the guy to go after. There's a kid, I'm brain farting on his name. I think his last name is Peters from Green Bay. I think he's going to be coming available. I'll be perfectly honest, I haven't started looking at free agents or draft picks too much yet just because my personal policy is I don't look at that stuff until the season's over because I don't want to look at next year until this year's over. But you see and hear a few names and you start to pay a little bit of attention. But
yeah,
those are 2 guys that I've kind of taken a look at. Addison's also a great guy to use as an example. Could definitely be a quality depth add, if nothing else.
Well, the only thing I have against Melvin Ingram is simply because it's always a toss-up if 3-4 outside linebackers can convert to 4-3 defensive ends. Some of them can do it, and they do